Welcome back to season 2 of The Cooking Pros, the show where you get to watch me get fatter and more disheveled in real time. Today we're going to do a classic breakfast, biscuits and gravy. Now, a couple things, we could cheat in this and we can just go to the store and get the pre-packaged biscuits, and that tastes delicious, and then we're done with this in 10 minutes. For kicks though, I thought let's make homemade biscuits as well. To do that, we have very simple ingredients. We have flour, sugar, salt, baking powder, butter, and milk. And that butter and milk is in the fridge and freezer because you want to keep that as cold as possible until you're ready for it. So I'm going to go ahead, take my 3 cups of flour. This is just all-purpose flour. My 2 tablespoons of granulated sugar. My teaspoon of salt. And 2 tablespoons of baking powder. Now we'll just make sure that this is well mixed so everything's all over the place. So this is 1.5 sticks of butter, and what I've done is I've chopped it up really good and then put it in the freezer. The reason is you want it super cold, and of course chopping up super cold butter is impossible. So I chopped it up first, stuck it in here, stuck it in the freezer for 20 minutes. I'll go ahead and add that to my flour, and I'll start incorporating this. Now I have that butter mixed in here, I'll go ahead and add my milk. And now we'll go ahead and mix up the milk, the butter, and all my dry ingredients. Now, I'm using a fork. You could use like a masher or something like that. The idea is you don't want this to be incorporated to the point, like you want it to be really rough. And you're just trying to make sure that all the flour is mixed in. You're not trying to make this smooth batter or something like that. So you can see, I just poured this out onto a floured surface, and if you look closely, you can see all these chunks of butter in here. We want that. What ends up happening is that as it bakes, the butter starts to steam. Those air bubbles from the steam have nowhere to go, and that's what creates flaky layers. But I'm gonna go ahead and level this down and kind of fold it over onto itself just to start incorporating these ingredients a little bit more. I'll turn that and do that again for a total of 3 times. So from here, we can roll it out, or I'm just gonna use my hand. I'm just gonna flatten it till it's about 1 inch thick. And again, by doing those folds that we did, we created nice layers inside this. And again, when that baking powder and the liquid starts melting, when that butter starts melting, you're gonna start to see this pop up and get pretty flaky. Because the intern quit and took our cookie cutters, I'm gonna have to use this glass to cut my biscuit shapes out. I'm gonna go down here, and again, I don't wanna smash it, which I did a little bit. You can see it's a little bit thinner than I want, but this should pop up hopefully still a little bit. We'll go ahead and take this parchment lined sheet. I'll probably spray it a little bit too, because why not? And I'll just place that right there. So you can see here, I ended up finding this little cutter. This is why you want to do the cutter. You see those nice flakes and rolls? See how when I used that cup, it kind of smashed it and pushed it down? These round ones probably aren't going to pop as much as this one because it's got those nice flaky openings around it. So we'll probably make them the rest this star shape and hope for the best. So I'm starting to just take some of our scraps and re-put them in here. What you'll notice, however, is as this has been out a longer time, this has started to get really, like you could feel the butter melting. And that's why you want to do this very quickly, so that you don't have that butter melt. Because if that butter melts before it gets into the oven, it's not going to create those nice flaky shells or flaky crust. Just before putting them in the oven, I'm going to just brush the top with milk. This should create a nice brown top. Now I'll go ahead and put this into my preheated 450 degree oven for about 10 to 15 minutes. You'll know it's done when the tops are brown and it's nice and puffed up. Now we're going to make some homemade gravy for our biscuits and gravy. It's pretty simple. We're going to use this premium pork sausage. In reality, it's best not to ask what part of the pig this comes from, but what we do like about it is it's ground and it's going to get nice and crusty on my really hot cast iron grill. This is pretty hot, but I'm going to go ahead and pretty well seasoned, but I'm going to go ahead and add just a little bit of oil anyways, just so we can crisp up that meat pretty quickly. And I'll just go ahead and squeeze this pork toothpaste right onto the cast iron. All right, you can hear that sizzle. You can start to see it nice and browning. What I'm going to do is we're going to make kind of a roux using some flour, all-purpose flour, and the fat that's being rendered out of this pork. So I'm just going to sprinkle this around. And what this is going to do is create like a thickening agent. So when I add my milk, it creates kind of a cream. We'll do that. Then you can adjust this as necessary. Now that this is mostly cooked through, I'll go ahead and add some milk. While that's reducing down, it'll start to thicken as it mixes with that flour that we added previously until it becomes pretty creamy and rich. While we're continuing to let that sauce kind of thicken up, I'm going to go ahead and add some seasonings, just a touch of thyme. You can do oregano, you can skip it. I'm going to put just a little bit of salt. Now the pork is already salty, because the salt's added as a preservative, so you don't need to do too much. And then pepper is a huge staple in biscuits and gravy. You always taste that pepper in it, so I'm going to add a little bit of that. And again, just stir to incorporate it. While I've got the biscuits and gravy thickening up nicely, I got about a minute left on my biscuits. I'm gonna go ahead and fry an egg to put on top. That just sounds good. So just buttered up another cast iron here. I've just pulled these out of the oven. You can see that we have these nice flaky layers that have formed. You can kind of tell on some of the ones where I pressed down with the glass, they got flatter. They still started to puff up a little bit. Some of them did better than others. But you can see the Rockstar ones were the ones that we used the real cookie cutter for. And you can see that they're nice and flaky, right? If I rip one open, you can see how nice and soft and that is on the inside. So we'll take those biscuits. I'll take some of our gravy and I will pour it over the top. And pour that, get the yolk, over the top of that. And because my wife thinks it's good, we'll add a couple pieces of arugula. And most importantly, a little fresh pepper on top. There you go, biscuits and gravy.